Hello, everybody. Welcome. We are live. It is Sunday, June 7th, 2020. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, my friend, Phil Ferguson. How are you?
I am well, Matt, and this is perfect because it's 3 days before my birthday.
Well, happy birthday. Well,
Thank you. I'm older.
You know what I'll do here is that just for you, just because you're here and we're 3 days from your birthday, people who are watching on YouTube now will see a donate link above the chat. And that's unlike the other things that we have, where you can become a patron or you can support another way. This donation, 100% of that goes to the ACA. And just for Phil's birthday, I will guarantee you that every penny that is donated today will go directly to the ACA and not to Phil for his birthday.
Well, I tell you what, since you have a link custom for this show, I'm going to match the first $1,000 that's donated. How's that?
Wow. All right, you guys, you got to get on it. Phil has agreed to match the first 1,000
during the show only.
For this show only? Can you guys get it to 1,000 before I'm done with the announcements? Just because that would be awesome.
That'll be happy birthday to me.
Go boom, 1,000, 2,000. How you doing during all the quarantine and the madness and the riots and everything else?
Well, other than losing my trip to Italy, which sucked pretty hard because that was supposed to be April and May. My business hasn't really changed at all. If anything, more people seem to want to have a financial advisor when they're a little scared.
Sure.
And my clients actually apparently listened to my advice on my show. And the biggest problem I had in March was people throwing money at their accounts to add to it. The stock market was on sale. And so that was the biggest problem. I had a couple clients that were very skittish and nervous, but it's something that I've noticed. I guess I've done this for more than 20 years. Nobody called me in January after they just made 35% in calendar year 2019 and said, Phil, I just feel guilty. I made too much money. Maybe I should take some off the table. That just doesn't happen. How
it works.
Yeah, when you get a big drop, all of a sudden you get scared. Everyone's brave when it's going up.
It's always, this year's refund wasn't what last year's is, or this year I owe more than I did last year, or what's going on here, Phil? I thought you were managing the finances here.
It was funny. I had someone call me in January and they said, what items do we want to sell now to offset all the profits that I made last year? And I said, well, you're the world's, I can swear on here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You're the world's most unlucky motherfucker because everything you have went up. So, and they're like, no, when I had a broker before, there was always stuff that was down. And I said, well, that's a reason to not use individual stocks as a normal human being. If you live like Warren Buffett and pick stocks and control companies, that's fine. But for most people, index funds are better in so many ways. So,
yeah, I saw a post from you about let's see if I can remember, in January 2009, if you'd invested $100,000 in the S&P index?
S&P 500 index
S&P 500 index, and left it there for 11 years, you would have something in the neighborhood of 400,000 plus.
Yeah, 452 or something like that.
Cool. Well, Phil, by the way, not only is he a friend of mine, but let me do this in order so that I don't mess with the crew. First of all, in addition to all the abilities that people have to support and participate along with the ACA, yes, we are still operating remote, but there is merch that you can buy. And we have a link up there. It's bit.ly/AEN merch, and you can shop for Atheist Experience mugs, t-shirts, etc. Some of this will be changing as brand changes. So some of these things you're not going to be able to get forever because we're not keeping stock and inventory on them. But if you want it, there it is. We appreciate the support. In addition, there is a membership option, which you can join this YouTube channel. It's already set up. It allows you to do all kinds of stuff. Basically that plus the donation thing is getting us past what we used to with Super Chat, because now we don't lose any of the money. Everything donated to the ACA through the Atheist Experience channel, 100% goes to the ACA. And also, it's worth pointing out that in this incredibly difficult and trying time, this show has been very easy to do because of these people. The crew who are working behind the scenes to screen the calls, to do the TV switching, to do the audio stuff, to do it all from home, to interact with our guests. Like, hey, Phil logs in earlier today. Some of them have cats, which means they're better than the rest of you who don't have cats. But it's just, I'm overwhelmed at a group of dedicated volunteers who are, none of these people are getting paid for any of this. This is all, we're doing this because it's an important mission, because having these conversations is important. And even with the current state of things, that doesn't make it any less important. Phil, how many years have we known each other now?
12, 13, something like that. It was
before I got married.
Yeah, I guess so. I was going to chime in on the support, the crew, because not only did they have to invite me and schedule it and prep me and send me an 8-page document of all the things that I have to know and do, but we had multiple phone and video chats before the show, and they've been working all day already. And all I have to do is show up like you, and we just kind of talk to people for a while. But they've been doing hours and hours of work, which is kind of the motivation for me to say I'm going to match that $1,000, because this takes a lot of work, not to mention a lot of equipment. And sometimes things change and need to be upgraded or fail. So it takes money to do this whole damn thing.
We are really close to the end of the announcements period, and I'm almost ready to move on to the first caller. For the record, we are at $863 donated, so there's still a chance that we'll hit 1,000 before I'm done with the announcements. So we've known each other for 12 years or so, give or take. And we, at first it was we'd run into each other at conferences and stuff, and you were.
I remember those.
And ever presence there. But eventually, it, like many other relationships in the community, it changed, and it wasn't just like, oh, it's Phil from Skeptic Money here at the convention again. Hey, man, but it's like you're staying at my house, and we're friends, and you're doing the show and everything else. In all those years, you started, and you were very supportive of conferences, and still are. But 12 years ago, around the time we first met, what has changed in those 12 years that surprised you, and what hasn't changed that's turned out to be a surprise?
Are you wanting anything in the world, or conferences, or atheism, or what?
I mean, generally, I'm talking about the atheist secular community.
Yeah.
Granted, I'm surprised that at the news every day, including people who are turning on the president, who are Republicans.
That I found very amazing, and I was just talking to my wife the other day about how, dare I say, blessed I am, is that there used to be for a long time just 4 or 5 national conferences, and that was it. And 10, 12 years ago, we started this regional, local conferences, and some of them continued on for years, and some of them failed. But I had one year where I went to 14 different conferences in the calendar year. Some I spoke at, many I tabled at, some I was a sponsor at. And of course, this year we've gone the other extreme where there's no conferences, maybe later this year. But a lot of the little local ones have kind of done their thing and petered out, and it's kind of reconsolidated again to several big ones and a few regional ones. And there's some places that can pull it off. It's weird because a city like Chicago, or even in the entire Chicago suburbs, people are like, why? What do you have a conference for? What's the problem? But places like Arkansas and Tennessee and Kentucky and Alabama can have conferences because everyone sees the problem. It's every day in their lives. I see people come and go, and somehow I've kind of magically dodged a lot of the bullets that have taken out, not literal bullets, but theological, social, whatever mistakes humans make. And some people get real active and burn out and leave. And I've just kind of been there, steady stream, doing what I can while still running my business. So
yeah, that's one of the things that I've kind of enjoyed watching this too, because you and I have both seen people come and go. People who I would imagine there are some people who we both thought would still be here doing this.
Yeah.
And for reasons they're not. And then there's other people that I was surprised by as well. But I have a message for you from chat, which is happy birthday. You owe us $1,000. And actually, did you already donate that?
I did not.
Okay, then I need to tell you that before the announcements are over, we actually raised $2,000.
There you go.
And yours caps it, takes us up to the $3,000 goal. So we're going to go over the goal before we've taken a single call. We appreciate Phil so much, and we appreciate all the people in chat who are donating to make this happen.
Yeah, thanks.
You know that pretty much none of you are here to really listen to me and Phil wax nostalgic about the atheist movement, but instead are more interested in cult.
It's a telethon.
Yeah. So let's see if we can get some callers on here. We've got David in Georgia. You are live with Phil and Matt. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
And is that Georgia, the state in the United States?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's Georgia in the United States. Yes, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Did they give you the question or whatever about the magnetic field?
Yeah, it says here that you're saying that if you go back 100,000, I'm assuming 100,000 years.
Yes, sir.
You're saying the magnetic field would not have been able to support life on Earth?
Yeah, the whole Earth would have been like a giant microwave. You know, like how they make people leave the Hadron Collider when they turn it on because of magnetation.
Yeah. No, I don't know that.
None of that's true, by the way. None of that's true, by the way. The Earth's magnetic field is created by something that we call the dynamo. It's been around for about 3.5 billion years. It started off weak, intensified, and now is weakening again. And it occasionally goes through reversals, like one happened about 780,000 years ago. But what you're describing...
Yeah, I've seen the Google... I've seen the Google thing. You're avoiding, like I said. The problem is they can sit there and measure the magnetic field by isotope dating. And they sit there and they know the decay rate and everything. They got all this documented. And like I said, if you go back 100,000 years, no biological life on Earth would have been sustainable. All this is scientifically documented.
Where is it scientifically documented? Because the entirety of Earth's geologists and biologists seem to not be aware of this feature that you found.
Nobel Prize time here.
You're on with the computer. You're welcome to look it up.
Why would I have to go look up your unfounded assertions? Hey, you know what else I heard? I heard that last week they found a brain in a jar. Was it yours?
Okay, I'll tell you what. Y'all sit there on the show and you sit there and you say this, okay, that you're not going to believe anything without scientific evidence, right?
I would like you to justify your assertion, sir.
Well, I am going to justify my assertion, but like I said, I need to sit there and make sure I'm not dealing with a hypocritical point of view. So if I don't have any scientific evidence to back anything up, you won't believe it, right?
I'm asking you to justify your claim. I'm happy to believe it just as soon as there's evidence for it, but I've already seen evidence that contradicts your claim.
I've already told you science has been able to measure the decay of the magnetic field for the past 200 years, and they've already seen that every 1,500 years it decays every 2%. So if you sit there and do the math, which you're welcome to go look this up, I can't do it right now. I'm driving. 100,000 years ago, the magnification of that would have been 200% more than it is now, and there would have been no life on Earth.
Hey, you know what's funny, Matt? I see this a lot in investments where people can look at a pattern going back a few years or even a longer period of time, and then assume that pattern continues back indefinitely. That's a terrible mistake. You can't look at 10 or 20 or 100 or 200 years of data and then just automatically assume that goes back without change or variation for 100,000 years. What are you basing that on?
Scientists do it all the time. It's called research.
Hey,
wow, it's not research at all. That's math.
David, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you a scientist? Do you have some expertise in this field?
Yes, I do. I do have a bachelor's degree.
A bachelor's degree in what?
Are you? Huh?
A bachelor's degree in what?
Anthropology, history, and science.
Okay. What does that have to do with the magnetic field? Because the science on the magnetic field, which is really...
we do radiocarbon dating on fossils and everything all the time.
Oh my God. Are you going to let me finish?
Archaeological sites and everything.
He's not going to let you finish. He doesn't care. No.
And for your own safety, David, stop talking when you're driving and call us when you're not.
Go ahead and hang up. Don't answer
Thank you for wasting the time.
Wow, that was profound.
Yeah. It's funny.
Profoundly ignorant.
It takes, I'm sure somebody in chat has already gone to Google this nonsense. And one of the things that we know is if you take a look at the Earth's magnetic field, we know that it flips occasionally. It's like many times in the last, 80 some odd million years or whatever. 183 times in 80 some million years is the figure that I found. Now that could be wrong. And I also found a claim from scientists describing what happened with the magnetic field that showed that the magnetic field started off weak, which is what you'd expect from a dynamo engine within the core of the Earth starting up. It would start off weak, get stronger. But I don't understand this assumption that if we can tell a difference, that therefore we can extrapolate backwards.
Yeah, that's a leap too far, way too far. The other thing that's always fascinating to me is that the nice thing about the internet is you can find out any information you want. The bad thing about the internet is you can find any information you want. You can find a web page that confirms your pet theory. And if our previous caller really wants to understand the magnetic fields, find a nearby university, find professors in geology or physics, chemistry, and call them up, set up an appointment, a phone conversation, and they can educate you far better than we can, because this is not the Earth's magnetic field show. Yeah. This is Atheist Experience. So thanks for playing.
Yeah. We've got David in Brooklyn. You're on with Phil and Matt. And I hear you wanted to talk about my views on prostitution.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm happy to be on here with you. I've been watching the show a lot lately.
Yeah, glad to have you.
I saw an episode. Yeah, thanks a lot. I saw an episode. I think the lady's name was Carolyn. She wasn't really consistent within her arguments, as I imagine it would be when you're following the Bible guidelines. You know, there's a lot of contradictions there. However, you got to this one point where you guys were talking about, prostitution, and there's nothing wrong with it. I happen to disagree with that, and I'll do my best to lay out my reasons here.
Okay. Can I pause for just a second?
Sure.
I know you're responding to something I said, or perhaps something you think I said, and I'll be happy to chime in on this and talk about my position. But we need to be clear. So please prepare for pauses in this, so that when you define something, Phil or I can say we agree, we disagree, or there's an issue there. Okay?
Okay, gotcha.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right. So I wrote down 5 things here. One is self-value, right? Now, the idea that somebody you care about would be, you would say that, for lack of, I'm going to say priceless, right? Like they're priceless to you. You can't put a price on somebody you care about. When you sell yourself for sex,
Stop, David. In prostitution, you don't sell yourself. In prostitution, you're not selling yourself. It is a service. It is not selling yourself.
When you're selling your body, I guess, to be more specific.
No, you're not selling your body.
Yeah. So David, I have another example.
Do I just get to keep her, or him, or them?
You're selling the usage of your body. I mean, I get you guys want to be specific. I'm gonna, I'll do my best.
But I'm gonna let Phil do this.
Well, I was just going off that first comment, is that if I work for McDonald's at $10 an hour, I might be selling part of my time and part of my labor for money, but I'm not selling myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm choosing to do a certain thing, my choice, for a certain amount of money. Mm-hmm. And whatever that is, as long as nobody's getting hurt or abused or penalized, I don't know what the problem is.
Yeah, I could understand that. I think that the difference, though, is that I think it's a little bit different in terms of entering a physical body. And I'll move on to my second point to try to.
What if I give blood for a fee? What if I give blood? If I give, I donate blood, or I get paid for blood, or hemoglobin, or something like that, and they stick a needle in me, does that fit in your category of entering my body? Because something entered my body, it's now immoral?
No, I think it's a little bit of a false equivalency there, and I'll tell you why.
I'd also point out that's illegal. You're not allowed to sell organs and tissue and stuff like that. But yeah,
forget the legality of it. But I think that the idea that we can compare sex to these things comes from this idea that sex can be a casual thing.
It can be a casual thing. This seems to be your primary objection, because you started with this notion of self-value. I know I have friends who are sex workers. Sex work is real work. They value themselves, and some of them value themselves very much, and will charge a premium for their time and companionship. Please explain to me, would it be okay for me to pay someone to hold my hand?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Say
Would
so.
it be okay for me to pay someone to kiss me?
Well, I don't know. See, I think I don't know. I wouldn't say, like, I'm not going to say it's not okay, but what I would say is that I think there's personal ramifications.
If someone is
like,
willing, if I'm willing to give someone a $5 bill in exchange for them kissing me, and they're willing to kiss me for that $5 bill, what business is it of yours?
I wouldn't say it's my business. I think people are free to do whatever they want. I'm just kind of.
How could you make a case that it's immoral? How could you make a case that it's immoral or worse, should be illegal?
Well, I'll tell you why. So I think that essentially, I would consider sex, a vice, much like, like food can be a vice, things like that. And I think that it kind of becomes an unquenchable thirst. And I think that the more you kind of just like obey these certain desires, the more you will you'll feel empty. I mean, that was my experience, because I used to feel the opposite. I used to be, we're all free to do whatever we want, and I'm going to have sex with as many people as I can, and I'm obeying my nature and things of this nature, and sex parties and what have you. And I came to find that it's never enough. The desire becomes, it's like this unquenchable thirst, and it leads to like a feeling of emptiness.
Yeah.
I mean, do you guys get where I'm coming from?
You need to speak to an actual counselor with an expertise in treating this, because what you're talking about is something along the lines of sex addiction, which isn't even a real thing. But the fact that you had a particular experience is independent from other people's experience, and is not an argument for why something should be immoral. I have a friend who can never have a drop of alcohol because of the way their brain works. I can. We're functionally different in that respect. But what we're asking for you here is, what reason should we as a society have to hold prostitution illegal?
I don't think we should.
Thank you. You agree with us, and you agree with us. Well, you called in, and
no, on some level, look, it's not about legality. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
That's the only thing I care about. I legitimately do not care what your opinion about the moral issue is. I only care whether or not you are in favor of legalizing it or keeping it illegal. That's my only concern, and that's true for now. I care in the sense that there are other discussions to be had, but as long as you're okay with prostitution being legal, you and I are on the same page.
And David, I would say if you think that there's a problem that you don't want to participate, then you can choose to not participate, either being the person giving the money or the person receiving the money. If that's not something you're interested in, don't do it. But if you don't have any reason to think that it should be illegal, I'm not really sure what your beef is.
Well, I would argue that it is damaging to the self, and I'll use a word you guys probably won't agree with, but I'll say, spiritually, like your spiritual self.
You're right. Not only are Phil and I not going to agree with that, because that word is used in so many different ways, it doesn't add anything to this discussion, but even in the most charitable way possible, the thing that you're describing, if I were to be the most charitable listener possible, to say, what about prostitution damages someone's spirit, even in a metaphorical sense, it's just simply not true that prostitution necessarily does that. There are people who are not cut out for that job, just like there are people who are not cut out to be farmers. There are people who are not cut out to be ranchers. There are people who are not cut out to be doctors because the sight of blood makes them queasy or whatever else. You don't get to use what your personal impression and what you suspect that it does to, can we use the word psyche instead of spirituality or spirit? Because I think psyche, it sums it all up. So prove that engaging in prostitution causes damage to the psyche. Not that it can, because certainly it can for individuals, just like seeing blood can cause damage to the psyche for different individuals. Prove that it does to an extent that we should just declare this as a universal bad thing and not allow it.
Well, would you say, I guess to do that, I'd have to start citing statistics. I mean, statistically, would you say that prostitution has done more good or wrong?
I'm sorry,
not wrong. I mean, more good or harm.
So statistically, first of all, it would be nice to cite statistics. It'd be nice if you actually talk to some actual sex workers, but you can't compare apples to oranges. We have to look at where prostitution is legal and well regulated, and those individuals are protected. Is it doing more harm than good? I don't know. Did you bring any data? Because my position here is not about whether it does more harm than good. My position is that as a matter of individual freedom, this should be permitted. I don't know. Go ahead, Phil. I don't know.
I've got really nothing to add. I think a person's usage of their own body and their own time and the work that they choose to do and the amount they choose to get paid for it is up to them. As long as it doesn't infringe on anyone else's safety, whatever. It's and of course, if you don't think there should be any laws to make it illegal, then again, I'm kind of stuck at what is the disagreement that we have that has value?
It's just starting to sound like you have a personal problem with it, and you can't seem to put together an argument of why everybody should agree.
No, well, I don't have a problem, but like, I'm in a monogamous relationship. Like, I mean, maybe when I was young, like running around, but I guess what I'm trying to say is this: like, I'm agreeing with you guys because I'll make an example. Like, using drugs can be a bad thing. It can be a harmful thing for ourselves, right? But if we legalize it, drug use will.
Yeah, I was just going to say which drug. I take drugs every day.
Yeah, I take drugs every day too, and lots of people do. So, see, this is the thing: is you're engaged in sort of sloppy arguing where you say one word that has some connotation or some denotation that allows you to smuggle in a bad thing. First of all, drugs aren't bad. Drugs can have a negative effect on some people in some circumstances. And that's why I'm not in favor of legalizing everything. I think we still need some regulation. But like, I think weed should be legal and perhaps more than alcohol.
Yeah, listen. Yeah,
so
guys, I agree with
what drug are you worried about?
Listen, I'm not as inexperienced as, so like, you know, I get that I need to try to be more specific. I'm assuming that when I say drugs, and I shouldn't assume that, but I'm assuming that you guys, you know, like crack, heroin, you know, shit like that. I don't mean like sitting in the grass taking mushrooms and like, you know.
Oh, wait, no. Because now I figured you're going to go with, you know, alcohol or weed or whatever. But you're like okay with mushrooms. You're okay with sitting out and taking strong hallucinogens that alter somebody's mind. But you suspected that we just automatically know you just meant crack and heroin.
Well, I mean, you guys consider mushrooms and like you consider that bad. I wouldn't think you would.
I don't have a personal problem with it. But what we're talking about,
like, I don't think mind expanding. Like, I think there are good drugs and there are bad drugs. I don't think mind expanding drugs are a bad thing.
You do realize?
What is it? What does mind expanding mean? Does my head swell? What does that mean?
I think you guys know what I mean, but I think you guys.
I actually genuinely don't. I've never taken drugs of any illegal kind.
I think David, you may be right. I think David, you may be right that we know what you mean. The purpose in us asking this is to get you to be clear, because you're starting to sound rather confused. And by asking these questions, we are trying to help you sound less confused. So when you say something like drugs are bad, okay, I need something more than a bumper sticker and an assumption that we know what we're talking about. But you called in about prostitution. So why are we talking about?
I'll go in with, because I was trying to make a simple comparison, but you guys kind of jump all over me, and I get it, but I'm trying my best to work my way through it.
Yeah.
The problem here, David, is that the analogy you tried to make, let me break it down for you. Bad things are bad, okay? That was your analogy. You went to drugs and you did it in a general sense. And then of course I don't mean mind expanding drugs and I don't mean this. I just mean the bad drugs. So that makes your argument, bad drugs are bad. And this is supposed to be analogous to prostitution. How and why?
Okay. So the point that I was trying to make is that if you legalize bad drugs, all right, the very act of legalizing it would do away with a lot of the the problems that come from it being illegal, let alone the drug itself will become a problem. Look, I don't know anyone with a healthy.
I don't know how this is relevant to prostitution. In order for this,
I think what this is, this is actually an argument for legalization of prostitution.
Yeah, because in order for this to be analogous, you would have to have made the case that prostitution is bad, and you haven't even started to do that. You just think it's bad.
Well, no, I mean it's kind of hard. You guys really kind of like interrupt me every time I say something. So
that's a lie. That is, or that. Sorry, I'll retract that. That's not true. We are asking clarifying questions, which is what I pointed out at the beginning. I'm wanting to know why you think prostitution is bad, so much so that you think you can just do a direct analogy to it's roughly the equivalent of bad drugs. So make the case for bad prostitution is bad, or I'm moving on.
Okay. I would argue that it is damaging to the psyche because I think it is an extreme.
What you
think that it is.
What you think is irrelevant. Do you have evidence that it is damaging to the psyche, and in a way that we should make it illegal? Not just it damage some person's psyche, but it is likely to damage the majority of people's psyche who interact with it. Do you have any evidence for that?
I don't think that'll be hard to pull up.
Well, maybe you should.
Apparently, it is.
You should have pulled it up before you called, because we're moving on. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. He tried. It's just because it's one of those things where it's icky to me, and therefore it should be illegal. But when you really press for details, there's no details there. It's just like I had someone tell me that pot should be illegal, and I asked them why, and they said because it has 100 carcinogens. And I happened to look up cigarettes, and it had something like 500 carcinogens. And I said, so should cigarettes be illegal? No. Okay. So why should something that's more harmful be legal and something that's less harmful be illegal? And, you can go around and around like that. And often it's someone's not really thought through the rationale of why they have an opinion on something. They have opinion on something, and now they're scrambling. And that leads to the frustration of the caller or someone that I might be talking to, is that they're scrambling to try to justify what they already think, without having done the justification work first.
They've got a sample size of one, and I get it. There are things that we feel icky about for reasons that we can't explain and don't know. And usually, I think if you dig in on why you feel icky about it, it's because somewhere in your past, someone convinced you that this is something you're supposed to feel icky about. Like I've talked about this before when I was at Dawn's wedding. I remember years and years ago, if I saw two guys kissing, I'd go like, whoa. That was kind of an ick moment for me. And I figured it feels like that's a natural response, And so when people say, oh, that's a natural response, of course you're going to be repulsed when you see two men kissing. That's nature. And then when I grew up and learned a little bit more, and Dawn got married, and when they jumped the broom and they kissed, and I was like, oh, and I realized there'd been a change in me. The change had been, hey, I actually cared about the truth of this situation enough to evaluate it and not just go with what it felt like to me. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to with David, is that he feels that prostitution is a bad thing. And the hard part is that it can be. So there are plenty of scenarios where sex work is not safe, where it's not regulated, where it's not the right job for somebody. And
right.
And in those situations, there can be damage done. And so if you've seen like let's say your mother was forced into prostitution at a young age, and you saw her live an absolutely terrible life, that's going to completely color your perception of what prostitution is. But that is not an accurate comparison of what your mom experienced or what somebody else experienced. It's not an accurate comparison to legalized, properly regulated sex work. And the fact that he was willing to maybe put a kiss for money in there. It's like, I don't know how many schools and churches have had kissing booths over the years.
Yeah. There's other jobs, especially right now, that you could have. For example, you might work in a meat processing factory.
Yeah.
Being a prostitute might be a lot safer. Being a sex worker might be a lot safer than working in one of those factories, or working in a coal mine. You are trading off, probably knowingly, years of your existence because that's the best job available to you in your area. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean it should be illegal, but we probably should regulate it. But anyway,
I wish I would have had time. I wish I would have thought about it, because I need to ask him about other aspects of sex work, not just prostitution, because I know porn stars, I know strippers, I know escorts. And it's funny because what he actually said in the thing was that it was self-serving, that I was that I wanted prostitution to be okay so that I could participate in it. When in fact, I have never paid a prostitute. I would have no objection to it. It should be legal. Right? Anyway, it doesn't. Yeah. We're going to move on. We've got another Georgia caller. Paul is here from Georgia. You're on with Phil and Matt. How are you?
Okay. How are you guys today?
Pretty good.
Fantastic.
Says you want to know why we think atheism is a better default than deism or theism?
Well, yes, generally, I seem like I heard you guys talk, or one of you, Matt, talk about this another time. And sure. I don't think I understood fully what your reasons were, why you thought that should be the default position.
Well, maybe you'll understand. I'll let Phil do it because maybe I wasn't clear.
So, Paul, let me ask you: Are you a Christian or not a Christian?
I am.
So that's yes, you are a Christian.
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Okay. Do you believe in the Norse god Thor?
No.
Okay. Why not?
I don't think there's any good evidence that.
There you go.
God,
you just answered the question. Is that you don't have evidence for Thor, so you just don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not saying Thor doesn't exist. Right. You're not saying Thor can't be possible. You're saying I don't know. I don't have any evidence. That's what atheism is. I don't have any evidence for the existence of any particular deity, and further, I have not seen any evidence at all for any kind of Christian God. But if you have evidence, I'd be happy to review it and reconsider my position. But I'm not taking a position against God. I've just seen no evidence for it.
But before we get to that, the thing, just so that it's clear, is that you had a default position on Thor that it's not worth believing in Thor until there's evidence for it, right?
Correct.
You answered your own question, because your question was, why do we think that atheism is the better default position? You do the same thing because you don't believe in Thor until there's evidence. You don't believe in Zeus until there's evidence. I'm assuming you don't believe in, that Muhammad was divine until there's evidence. All these other things. You are starting with the same default position. The only difference between the two of us is that you've evidently become convinced of a God, and Phil and I, well, actually have been convinced in the past and are no longer convinced.
Right. No, I get that. I guess really the core of the reason I was wanting to ask this question is it seems like that there are, as best as I can tell, and maybe you can correct me if I'm mistaken about this, but it seems like that there are 4 categories of explanations for the world as we know it and the existence of life. Either there's 0 gods, 1 God, more than 1 God, or everything is God. And when I look at those possibilities, and if there's other possibilities, I haven't thought of them. I'd be glad to hear what your thoughts are, but all of those seem like really unlikely options, including my own. I do not think that if it seems like to me there ought to be another choice because every option seems bad.
Sure.
In terms
and Paul, what I would put this down to is that if you don't like any of those possibilities, which is perfectly fine, that's cool. Then the answer you might give if someone asks you, where does the world come from? You could just say, I don't know. And you stop there. You stop with what you don't know.
I can appreciate that. But the thing that seems mistaken about stopping there is if it didn't matter what the implications were for believing one thing or another, then fine. But there are implications for every different one of these categories.
Yeah.
And it does matter what we believe.
It would be nice to think you got it right. Yeah, it'd be nice to think you got it right. So why on earth do you think you've got it right and we don't?
When I look at what exists, the thing that is the most compelling to me is my own consciousness. I cannot get away from that. And so I have to reject the explanation that we're all part of the same God or some kind of one experience. I reject that because it just departs completely from my own experience. And so when I look at the other options of either there's no God or there's one eternal God or there's more than one eternal God, and I look at what's here, I could swallow the idea of evolution 100 times before I could accept the idea that the first cell just sprang out of nothing.
That's not, nobody's saying that.
Yeah.
You would be right.
Well, or not sprang out of nothing that came from.
You would be correct.
It came from no.
You would be correct. You would be warranted to accept evolution because evolution is a fact, and the theory of evolution by means of natural selection is the model that describes that fact to the best of our ability. So it's far more reasonable for you to accept that than the proposition that the first cell sprang out of nothing. However, no one in the history of science has ever suggested that a cell sprang forth out of nothing.
Right. And maybe I phrased that poorly. I guess what I should have said is something more along the lines of that a living cell that had the ability to replicate and mutate and process either food or had photosynthetic abilities, something of that level of complexity had to exist in order for the evolutionary process to get started.
Well, I think what I see here, and this was a fascinating thing for me when I was growing up, is that maybe if you had some classes on biology or chemistry and had a much deeper understanding of how those things work, it wouldn't feel like such an impossible mystery. It just kind of like I can't remember the story where someone went back in the past into King Arthur's court and predicted an eclipse, and they thought they had magical powers. They just knew that this was going to happen. And sometimes there's a lot to know and a lot to understand, and it makes it so difficult to understand it that it might be actually easier for our brains to just say, that can't be the way it happened. Well, you not being able to fully understand it doesn't make it less or more likely, but if you do study it, it might make it easier to swallow, I guess, as a worldview.
I can appreciate that, and that's not a terrible frame of reference to start with, I don't think. But because there is such apparent design in everything that exists now, it seems like that some kind of designer is a good explanation for that. And
yeah, if you had another example of a life form or a planet where you could see the designer and the work that they did, I would be much happier with that analogy. But at this point, you're taking things that exist, and again, going back to what I said before, without knowing how else that could have happened, it must have been a designer. It's one of the things when you're talking about a cell or the things that make up cells and they reproduce. Any molecular collection of items that was not able to reproduce did not reproduce. Yeah. And so as soon as the first thing that can reproduce appears.
Right. Earlier when Paul was basically saying that, in order for evolution to start working, it needed like a self-replicating life. You're correct. Right. There is no evolution. There is no change unless there's a self-replicating molecule and the option for genetic drift, or essentially change in allele frequency over time, or some sort of change over time, because that's what evolution is addressing. It's a fact that it has happened. My curious thing is that, I get it. You're looking at the world and you're saying, this seems to make more sense if there was like a designer that did it. But is it the case that it makes more sense if there was an intelligent agent designer, or if there was simply an ordered universe with structure? Because when you look at water molecules, there's hydrogen atoms and oxygen atoms. Does that feel like it needed a designer to put those together?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I understand what you're asking exactly.
A water molecule is just two hydrogen atoms connected to an oxygen atom, correct?
That's my best understanding of it, yes.
Yeah. So does that feel like it needed a designer, or does that just feel like it's something that, hey, this is the way the universe works. These atoms are attracted in this way, in this configuration, et cetera?
I don't know. Water seems like a very special material to me. It has really weird properties that seem
almost
to
everything has weird properties. Yeah. Paul, one of the thoughts that I had when I left Methodist Church when I was 13, I was really close to the stuff that you're talking about, what you're thinking about. So I love it very much. And one of the thoughts that I had is that if evolution, if life, if planets, if Big Bang, if all of that is too complex or beyond my understanding to have happened, then would not the creator that made all those things be even more complicated and more mysterious and more impossible to understand fully? And so you've answered a very, very big question with a very, very bigger question. So you've not solved anything, but you've pushed it off to another level that for some reason, probably because of your upbringing or your experience, makes it feel okay. So instead of just stopping at, I don't know, you push it one step further back and say, God done it. And if someone says, where does God come from? I don't know. He always existed. Well, maybe the universe always existed, and this is one iteration of it. And we are just incredibly blessed to be in a position that we are aware of ourselves and can ask the question, where did it all come from? Doesn't mean we're capable necessarily of having an answer, but providing a bigger riddle to it doesn't move me anywhere. And that's one of the things that just really helped me out of religion when I was 13, is this idea that I like simple answers if I can get them. And if the answers aren't there, a more complicated answer behind it makes it even worse for me.
Yeah, and I also think there's, if we were to decide, for example, and I think this is probably, I apologize, Paul, because it may be that I'm combining two calls, but earlier in the call, did you say that you were you're a theist of some stripe? You believe in a God, but do you believe in a particular God? Just the Christian God, generic, or?
I believe in Yahweh, the creator of the Bible.
So if we assume for a second that the earth or the universe, in fact, had an intelligent designer, and if we also go ahead and assume that you have managed to pick the correct one out of all the potential intelligent designers that have been proposed, that comes with some baggage. So if in fact you're correct and Yahweh is real, then this isn't just, hey, here's a being that created the universe. That belief comes with some baggage, because clearly that God wants or expects things from us, right? Sure. So even if I were to agree with you that the universe was designed by something, and even if I were to agree with you that it's designed by an intelligence, I don't know how you get to this God. And the reason I bring this up is not to put you in a position where now you have to defend something else, but to make this point. If you're correct, and Yahweh, the God described in the Bible, is the real one that is creator of everything, then you are now advocating and believing in a God that is refusing to settle this disagreement between us, that you think that this God cares about us and wants something from us, and yet will not participate in a conversation with us, but has engaged in conversation with other people. So this God that you believe in is playing favorites, playing hide and seek, and creating an orderly universe that scientists, in their best efforts to describe, manage to discover how it works, physics, chemistry, biology, etc., without any of them needing to appeal to this God that you've reached as a conclusion. Does it make more sense when you're looking at the 0, 1, many, or God is everything thing, that your model of one God may account for the appearance of design, but the 0 God model, which is the default and the one that I'm going with until somebody does something different, not only includes something that accounts for the appearance of design, but includes a reason why we're not hearing from any God, why God isn't healing amputees, why God isn't answering prayer in any detectable way, why God isn't communicating with people in any clear way about what he wants. If there are 0 gods and people are just inferring a God and then talking about what it wants, that is explained better by the no gods hypothesis. So the no gods hypothesis covers a whole bunch of things, including the origin of the universe, the appearance of design, the silence of gods, whereas your model with one God doesn't account for all that. It only accounts for one possibility behind the appearance of design.
Well, that does presume that a particular view that I don't think that I hold about Christianity, and I'm outside of what most people would consider orthodox on a lot of different issues. But I think that God has purposes that He is determined to accomplish, and that, as best as I can tell, the center of that is that the call to love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And when you look at the final state of things in Revelation 21, all the wicked and the righteous have all been resurrected and judged according to what they've done. The wicked are destroyed permanently so that they'll never exist again.
I get it, David. Paul, sorry, I get it, Paul. The question though, Paul, is it fair for you to cherry pick verses at convenience and ignore other verses? If the Bible is the only source of information that you have about Christianity, and you are cherry picking the ones that you're comfortable with and disregarding the ones you're not comfortable with, how is that?
I try really hard not to do that.
Yeah, I've got another thought experiment, Paul. If you play along with me for a minute, the story that you just weaved gave the impression that God would actually care what you do, right? Okay, so have you ever stood on top of or looked down on an anthill?
I have.
Have you ever wondered what those ants are doing, and if they sacrificed an ant to you, would that change your day in any way? Would that make you better?
Certainly not.
So there's an actual measurable difference between an ant and its value and intelligence and yours. But when you look at the difference between you and God, it's theoretically infinite, at least the Christianity that I've heard most people talk about. So what is this being that can create a universe that's billions of light years across, can create billions upon billions of stars and planets around many of those stars and galaxies and stars that aren't in galaxies, but yet at the end of the day, he's worried about what Paul does. And if he's worried about what you do, why didn't he make it clear what he wants? Because there's something like 10 or 20,000 types of Christianity in the United States alone. How is one saved? Sure. By baptism, by good works, by donating money. All the Christians can't agree because there's no clear message.
Well, I will have to admit that there's a lot of ambiguity in the scriptures. And I think that they do account for the fact that there's such variety of different convictions and denominations and things like that. And that's a complicated question to address too.
I agree.
It seems like we're kind of jumping around a couple different things. And I kind of wanted to address your earlier question, if I could, about, I started to explain the reason I think that God is hidden to the degree that he is in order to create a world in which it's possible for him to accomplish his ultimate purposes. And that in order for his ultimate purposes include people choosing freely to love him and love each other. And I think that if he created a world and he was as obvious as, like anybody could just look up and see him, or you could call him on the phone and talk to him, or whatever other way that he was very obvious, if he really is the infinite sort of level being, then any kind of obvious exposure of himself to us would be almost coercive.
No.
In order to...
No.
Okay.
I understand. So this is sort of the, hey, if God revealed himself to us, nobody would refuse to worship God. It'd just be so obvious. And so he wouldn't get a real worship. But God should be able to tell the difference between sincere worship and somebody who's just doing it to avoid. It's not like you can fool God, can you? Can you fool God?
Of course not.
Of course not.
No, but it's not just about fooling. It's not about fooling God.
No, hang on. Because if God reveals himself, that doesn't change anything about people's ability to worship or respect that God, and it doesn't change anything about God's ability to detect it. Do you also think that there is a Satan that is the evil adversary of God?
I do think that Satan exists and that he is the evil adversary. Yeah.
Sure. So I'm doing this. I'm asking because you seem to be willing to pick and choose out of the book. So I want to make sure we get that straight. But does Satan know that God exists?
Yes, of course.
And yet he was still able to rebel, right?
He chose.
It's unclear to me what the role of Satan is in terms of the his prior choices and that kind of thing.
Okay.
That's a debate that I'm not prepared to have.
So what's
the
role? What's the role of women according to your God?
The role of women? In what respect do you mean?
Are they equal to men?
In what respect do you mean? Are they equal to men in terms of?
I wouldn't even.
What way?
I wouldn't even have suspected that this needed to be clarified. But are they allowed to have positions of authority over men?
Can they teach men?
And they teach the church. Are they allowed to own property equal to men? Are they allowed to inherit equal to men?
Well, those are. We don't have time to answer all those questions, but
yes, we do.
What would you like for me to address?
We do have time to answer.
I'm happy to take the time that you're willing to take.
We do have the time.
Which one do you want me to address first?
No, Paul, it's really easy. According to the Bible, they are not equal. They are not equal with regard to property. They are not allowed to have authority over men. They are not allowed to teach.
It's real clear.
They're all biblical positions.
Yeah, it's there. It's in print, black and white.
Which one would you like?
I don't want you to defend anyone. I wanted to know do you think, would you have a problem with a woman who does not obey her husband?
I think that is something that is called for in Scripture, and so yes, I think they're supposed to do that. But at the same time, it says in just the next couple verses after that, and I can't pull it up right now. I can't remember exactly where it's at, but it talks about how we're supposed to submit to each other.
No, wives submit to your husbands, and the husbands submit to Christ. The husband is the head of the household, as Christ is the head of the church. Okay, this is Ephesians.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
And wives are supposed to submit to their husbands, according to Colossians 3:18. You cannot look up at these passages in the Bible and come out of it with any sort of notion to defend that women should be considered equal to men.
And if you do somehow find a way to justify that in your own mind, why has virtually every Christian for the last 2,000 years been wrong?
And that's the reason I asked in the beginning, in what respect do you mean? Because I don't think that anybody's equal in every respect.
Well, should women be allowed to vote?
Should women be allowed to vote? Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Should women be allowed to vote?
I'm fine with that.
Okay. So no, that's okay. So I'm fine with that too, by the way. But why did it take 1,900 and something years to women's being able to vote in the United States of America? Why did that happen? If we're a Christian nation, if we're so smart and we're followers of Christ, why were we wrong the first 200 years of our existence?
I don't know why you think that the United States is a Christian nation.
Good. I like that answer.
Yeah, I would agree. It's not.
Yeah.
But plenty of Christians seem to think it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of Christians who supported. There's a lot of Christians and ministers and priests and stuff that supported the idea that women cannot vote.
Sure.
And they used the Bible to do that.
I'm sure they did. People have used the Bible to do all kinds of horrible things.
Yeah, like
1600. Well, in the 400s until the 1820s, people were killing each other in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, but Paul,
that is not
Paul,
Jesus.
Is the Bible okay with slavery? And are you okay with slavery?
I think that there is a form of slavery that the Bible does not condemn. I'm not okay with slavery in the modern way that people practiced it, where they had people that were owned as chattel and that kind of stuff. And I don't think that.
I'm interrupting, Paul. I'm interrupting to save you from yourself. You go, we're going to move on to another caller. You go read Exodus 21 and what the Bible says what the Bible's rules for slavery are. And then ask yourself this question. Would you be my slave
forever
under what Exodus 21 says? And remember that if you agree to be my slave, not only can I beat you as long as you don't die within a couple of days, but you're my property now, which I can pass on to my children. And so if you would be okay with being my slave under Exodus 21, I will free you, because obviously even your cherry picking has done something really bad to your mind. But you don't seem to know enough about what the Bible says, and you kind of have this fuzzy thing. I would be much happier if you just said, wow, the universe kind of looks designed, but I don't know anything about who that designer is. But you didn't do that. You said the universe kind of looks designed, and I think I'm going to go with this version of that without any justification and nothing more than cherry picking out what you're comfortable with. That's a big problem. And I'm going to move on to some other calls so that we don't just sit here and like beat up on you.
Thanks, Paul.
But thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit of lag is rough, man.
It is. It's really hard to, and I need to hit the hold thing more. It's just that the hold also takes time.
Yeah, I think we've done pretty well, but it requires some talking over sometimes. So forgive us, listeners.
Yeah, we are not trying to be dicks. We could be if we really wanted to. You can't stop me. I want to. There was. I'm gonna take this call, even though.
Am I gonna regret it?
I don't know.
Okay.
Somebody hadn't been waiting long enough. So Todd in Colorado, you're on with Phil and Matt. How are you?
Matt Dillahunty. It's great to hear your voice and be able to talk to you. Phil, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Grazie.
What you got for us?
Hey, I believe you know my brother Scott and Bernie, and he's been trying to talk me into getting in touch with you. I am an atheist. I don't let many people know around me. I have a lot of good friends. I'm a very social person. When the topic comes up, I'm usually surrounded by, Catholics, Christians, and I have a hard time just stating my point, which is that, hey, if they want me to actually believe, then they have to provide me with evidence. But it's difficult without being ostracized. And just, if I got a group of Christians and Catholics around me, all kind of coming at me saying, hey, how do you prove, how do you say, that this happened? How did the world happen? How are there flowers? I mean, there has to be a God, and I'm trying to say, well, that really doesn't prove to me that God did it. So I have a hard time.
So Todd, I have an idea. I have an idea for you. When someone says, "Why do we have flowers?" or "Where did the world come from?" What I have historically done when a person asks me something like that, I ask them, "Is your intention to actually be educated on that topic, or are you trying to put me in a corner?" And if they say,
okay,
they're gonna be tempted to say, "No, I actually want to know," and then you say, "Why are you asking Todd? Why in the fuck are you asking me? I'm not the expert on that." Find a university and find someone in the horticulture department or chemistry department or biology department and go ask them. If you really want the answer, you're wasting my time and you're wasting your time by asking me, because I don't claim to have that information.
And we can all pretty much we can all pretty much know ahead of time that they're not asking because they want to know the actual scientific answer. They are in fact their argument is essentially, I think that I can explain all of this. Your model doesn't have an explanation for that, and therefore I'm on better footing than you are. And that's just not true, because if the right answer is I don't know, them pretending that they have the right answer puts them on weaker footing, because now they stopped looking for the right answer.
I hear what you're saying, and that makes perfect sense. The trouble I have is, these are, like social equals to me. These are close friends at times, and that can be rough. I don't want to be like, verbally beat up over this thing when I try to pose those kind of questions to them. You know,
Well, there's nothing requiring you to
tried.
ask them those questions either. You don't have to. I mean, if they're not bringing it up, you don't have to bring it up either. You can talk about safer stuff like sports and the weather.
Well, no, but when the topic is brought up, because usually I try to kind of deflect the conversation in other ways, just because I don't want to, get like almost backed into a corner, because I've got all of these people around me talking about, theism, and I'm trying to make a point, and they don't have the answers, because they haven't done the research, they haven't taken the time to educate themselves about this, but they use all kinds of things. Obviously, they use the words belief and faith and spiritual and so on. And I try to subtly suggest, like, well, you haven't provided me with any evidence.
You might want to try
what you're saying is a fact.
Yeah, a slightly softer approach might be you don't have sufficient or you don't have good evidence, because almost anything could be considered evidence if you make the bar so low that it's very, very weak evidence. But what you're looking for is good evidence or strong evidence. So I wouldn't say it's not evidence, because then that kind of maybe puts them in a corner. But maybe it's time to find a group, and maybe when we're allowed to meet together again in groups, to go hang out with some people who aren't particularly religious, so that you have a little bit more of a broader base of people you can talk to.
And once my brother gets back to Colorado, he and I have spoken about searching for atheist groups, or why am I not thinking of the word?
Like secular humanists, free thinkers.
Secular. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna look for groups around the area that I live, and hopefully, be able to communicate with them, and also develop good friendships with those people.
Absolutely. And if you have any difficulty finding a group, you can go to something like Facebook groups or meetup.com, and you can be the person that creates that new group in your area. And I'm telling you, if you build it, they will come. They're out there.
But you're in Colorado.
Thank you for saying that.
You're in Colorado, so you've got legal weed, which means that it's much better to get a bunch of people together and talk about philosophy stuff now.
Oh yeah. Oh, believe me, we do have some good dialogues for sure.
I'm sure. And maybe when this is over, I'll find a way to come visit. I'm going to move on to some other callers, Todd. But
thank you, Todd.
Reach out to those resources and stay strong.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Well, I got the thank you in, and the delayed hang up is often
that's rough.
So before we actually move on to the next caller, I just want to remind everybody that we are on until roughly 6 p.m. So another 20 minutes or so, but we may go a bit over as well today. We have Tom in Ohio. You're on with Phil and Matt. How are you?
How are you guys doing?
Fantastic.
I'm fine. Thank you. Yeah.
We're doing all right.
Would you mind reading me what the notes are that your call screener gave you about me?
Sure. It says that you're hearing voices. They are extra dimensional beings, and you're having a mystical experience with another level of being, and not mental illness.
Well, I said some people call it a mystical experience. I prefer to call it a natural experience.
Okay.
But I have heard voices since 1971. I'm 71 years old, actually, ironically, and they've become lately have become extremely active, shall we say, and communicative with me, so that it's with me. They're with me 24/7 as a multiplicity, or as a multiple aspects of being, as I like to say.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Just for clarity, so that we're on like a path where we can all get to the same page, could you tell us?
Yeah.
When you say hear voices, could you describe that better? Whether it's actually like you're hearing with your ears or hearing it in your mind, and then now that you're saying they're with you 24/7, what type of information are you getting from them, and how do you determine that what you're hearing is something real as opposed to something that your brain is inventing?
Well, there's three very good questions I've asked that myself. It's mainly in the mind. Okay, it's not something that could be recorded. In other words, I can't sit there and not say anything and have their voices come through and be recorded. What I can do is listen to what they're saying and then decipher it, because it's very confusing. It's oblique, very oblique, and then formulate a sentence around it. They like me to be, to help compose it with them or whatever, and then record that. And I have 13 years of recordings like that, and I used to transcribe it all the time. And I have, volumes of transcriptions, and so that's that. But it comes from the mind, okay. Although they have displayed every once in a while, like last night, for example, they display that I can actually feel them physically. I can feel them emotionally. I can touch them emotionally myself. They're very interactive. In other words, it's alive. It's nothing that's mechanical. They don't go over the same thing twice typically. Unless I demand it. I don't understand what's going on with them. It's very, very close. They're with me even when I get dressed. They're giving me choices in whatever I'm doing. There's always a choice involved with whatever you're doing. And so I have to choose as to which choice I have to do, and I get berated for it essentially in their way, and then I have to just kind of break through that. Initially, it started off extremely very negatively as far as I was concerned, but it was this is back in the service, and I had a major experience where I was out in a field and just heard, it's like they were coming out of the sky, and it was death. It was they wanted to kill me if I didn't go along with what they wanted. I don't want to get into that so much, but the point is, it was something that I had to confront. I couldn't say all of a sudden in the middle of that field, well, gee, I think you're a product of the synapses in my mind, and this looks like schizophrenia, and I'm not going to pay any attention to you. There was no question about it. You're just not going to avoid it. And I've been unable to avoid it ever since then, except for a 35-year period where I got married and I was other directed. What was your last question?
So wait, there was a 35-year period where you didn't hear voices?
Right. I didn't know what to. I got drummed out of the Army. Label me schizophrenic, paranoid. World-class psychosis. Okay, I need to get that out on the table.
Okay.
And I came home. I was 21, 22. My parents didn't want me to go to a hospital. I was on Thorazine and Haldol for a little while, which are terrible, terrible mind-suppressing drugs. And got off of those, never went back on any more psychotropics, and didn't know what to do. It was getting worse and worse. Again, they're very negative. It was, they call it omenclating. They have their own language. It was teaching me, they've taught me their own concepts. So it's a different dimension, so it's a different concept, huh?
Tom, so
first
of all, thanks for sharing this. Neither one of us, neither Phil nor myself, are in any way experts in this. What you're telling me, what you're describing, is that somebody in the military, in the process, diagnosed you. Whether they're right or not, it's irrelevant. But they diagnosed you with schizophrenia and strong delusions, and then you had a 35-year period where you. I don't know what any of this has to do with the atheist experience. So let me ask kind of one last question here. Are they giving you messages that would be roughly relevant to the show? Because I think we're way far afield of what's relevant to the show.
Yes, yes, they are. In fact, you're the only call-in show that talks about this stuff. Okay, so I was trying to. They reappeared about 13 years ago in a very, very big way. When I started getting into Gnostic teachings, Gnostic philosophy, stuff like that, and it came on in a very big way. And I was trying to work with them in terms of the Christian myth, okay? And it morphed to the point where they were essentially explaining the Christian myth and the pitfalls of it, and by changing me, by showing me without not telling me things. They end up showing me things by putting me through this gauntlet about things. For example, at the beginning, and then even then, there was a lot of hoaxing, a lot of hoaxes, a lot of misdirection, because my mind was misdirecting itself. In other words, I would say, well, let's call on Jesus Christ. Can I finish this part?
I don't think we're getting to how this is relevant.
Yeah,
and
I'm talking about Jesus Christ, for crying out loud. And they said, well, you're Jesus Christ.
And what?
They kept saying I was Jesus Christ, which is a crock of shit.
Yeah.
And so I had to omenplate or think my way out of that, which I did.
And the voices are now telling you that I'm Jesus Christ?
I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. I'm not saying that now. Hard to hear this. Unless Phil's got a thought that I'm unaware of, I think we're actually just going to move on, Tom.
Yes. Thanks for calling, Tom.
This is outside the realm.
Think you can, I think this is something you really can't handle. So I'm sorry.
You're right. You're right.
Yeah, thanks. You might want to try maybe put it together in an email where I can understand it better. But I appreciate your time, and sorry we couldn't be more, I don't know,
helpful.
Oh, what the heck. Minor in Arizona, welcome back. You're on with Phil and Matt.
Hello. Yeah. I'm sorry, I wanted to call back because my cell phone got all cut off last time, and I just wanted to apologize for that. But I also got something I want to say, because I got a story to tell. If I could just take a few minutes, I think, after I tell this story here.
I'd like you to keep it as brief as possible, because we have 4 other callers waiting and only about 12 minutes left on the show. So.
Okay. Yeah, I understand.
Then start telling the story.
Well, this is very powerful. Yeah, it's very powerful, because I think, people, if they hear it, they're going to say, well, we're probably not going to be atheists anymore. So,
okay, let's hear it.
I
want no more preamble, Minor. Just give me the story.
Go.
Okay. I was a long time ago, when I was about 16, in maybe 1958, me and my good friend, who was a ranch hand, he worked with me on my daddy's ranch. We were going to go up into the hills after we finished our work, and just outside the ranch, and we were going to play our guitars, because that's what we did. We liked music, and we got up into the hills, and I said to him, Yaki, let's sit down here and we'll play our guitars right here. And his name was Armando, but he was Yaki Indian. And that's why I called him Yaki. And just as we started to play, the helicopters came right over top of us, and there was all of them coming right over top of us, because they were coming from Fort Huachuca, which used to have a proving ground for the helicopters out there. And they stirred up the bobcats at the same time. And we didn't even know there was bobcats coming down on us until it was too late. And
What do you
so
mean by
they
too
came
late?
around the corner and they was hissing. Well, yeah, I mean, they were right on top of us.
You survived
the
it though?
Bobcat. Yeah, but they were spitting and hissing, and I only had a moment, because they were scared of the helicopters, and they looked like they were going to tear right through us. So I turned to Yaki and I said, Yaki, I'm going to have to kill these bobcats. And I had my rifle with me. I put it on the ground so I could play my guitar, and I tumbled off the log and I come up with my rifle to shoot the bobcats. And that's when I saw it. And I turned to Yaki and I said, Yaki, that was God. And he said, yeah, I know it was.
What was
because
God?
Both
A helicopter? God is a helicopter?
No, when I came up with my rifle to shoot him, we both saw, Yaki and me, we both saw that the bobcats had been turned into a rock, and that's how we were saved. It was an honest to God miracle.
And how
that's a true story.
Minor, how old are you again? I forgot.
71.
I'm 70. Yeah, this was way back when, maybe 1957 or 50.
I was asking how old you were. No, now.
Yeah,
Today.
right now I'm 78, but that was when I was just a young boy, way back.
Okay. All right. Well, so helicopters rustled up some bobcats, and you say they turned into rocks, and God did that, and we're supposed to believe it, right?
Well, I know what you're going to say. I understand, but let me give you. I got evidence for it.
No, I don't think you do understand, Minor. I don't think you do understand, because you called in and specifically said that you had an important story that was going to make some people say, "I'm not an atheist anymore." Do you really think that this story is capable of that?
Well, I mean, yes, yeah.
I think you're wrong.
People realize.
But now you've told your story, and we'll let it live, and we'll see if it makes anybody no longer an atheist. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's a common refrain that people will call, and sometimes they even say that God told me to call, and they're pointed out that God should have prepped you better.
Oh yeah.
Because wow, that's cool, yo. Well, if they turned into rocks, did they stay rocks? Can we go there now and see some bobcat rocks? That'd be kind of neat. I mean, if there was like 6 bobcat rocks, I'd be impressed.
I don't believe him. I don't believe it's one of those things where you don't want to be rude and say, "Oh, you're a fake caller, you're a prank caller."
Yeah,
that's what I'm convinced is going on here. And I'd already done the math, and he needed to be over 80 given the numbers that he did, but it was all approximations. So, yeah, I don't care.
Honestly, I was waiting for a punchline. That's one of the stories my dad would tell.
And when
there's a joke.
Yeah, it's like I laughed harder last night than I can recall laughing in probably 20 years. And it's a clip. I'm not going to post it, but I mean, I'm pretty sure if you went on YouTube and you just searched for Buddy Hackett Tonight Show duck joke, I think I laughed harder at that than anything I'd heard in forever. It was just brilliant. But all right, as a reminder, we're doing this show remotely. I'm here in Austin, Texas, at my home. Phil is at his home, not even in Austin, Texas, and this is what's going to continue for a little while. Austin's stay-at-home order is scheduled to end on June 15th, but that does not mean that the order's over and you can just do whatever you want, and we're going to do it. I don't know when the ACA library is going to reopen. The new board is going to have a meeting this Tuesday, and one of the things we're going to be talking about is what we're doing moving forward with the ACA, what procedures we're going to have in place to determine when is it going to be safe to open, and how we're actually going to open it. Is it just going to be a free-for-all? I doubt it. I suspect what's going to happen is that we will go back to allowing people to be at the studio after we're convinced. But like, I'm at high risk, my girlfriend's at high risk. It's just not worth it to put people at risk as long as things are going well. So you can probably expect considerably more remote shows like this. And a special thanks to Phil and other friends and people who are participating in these, because it's great. It's an opportunity we don't always have.
I just can't believe you do this every week or almost every week.
Yeah. It's wild. So let's see. We've got Mallory in Oregon. You're on with Phil and Matt.
Hi.
Thanks for your patience.
How are you guys today? It's all good. It's an honor to talk to you guys.
All right.
Wait.
I mean, you've been on hold for almost 2 hours, so I figured it'd be rude not to just let you dig right in. It says here that you, after becoming an atheist, you couldn't find anything that you like and anything that you're passionate about. So tell us what's going on.
Do you mind if I give you a quick bullet point?
Absolutely. Or I mean, I don't mind. Go ahead.
Okay. So, alrighty. So, bullet point with my faith story. I grew up United Methodist, which is another reason I was excited you were on today. Yeah. I was super heavily involved. I was like the voted in youth president. I wanted to be a pastor. I'd get angry when my family wasn't as serious as me, even like my parents. I got older, almost became Jehovah's Witness, but then became Mormon, got endowed, learned all the secret handshakes, wore the underwear, got married in the temple, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Then I almost went Messianic Jew, whole lot of other stuff later, ended up atheist. I used to do hours and hours of biblical religious study every day. I was known for it, like, throughout the area. It was decently impressive. People knew me as the Old Testament scholar. I sacrificed pieces of my education in college, and now I just really don't know. And it recently cost me probably the best relationship I've ever had, because I don't know big questions anymore. Like, do I want children because I actually want them, or has religion just convinced me that I want kids through my wife and all that kind of stuff? And so I've been struggling the last couple of years because I can't find anything that grasps my interest and that I can get really passionate about at any point of the same intensity. And so I was hoping you guys maybe had some good advice or thoughts or something to kind of find how to reignite passion, I guess, outside of the Jesus magic.
Well, one of the things that popped into my head is there is a group called Recovering from Religion that specializes in talking to people that have left a variety of religions, and they might have some insight. But one of the things I've done in my life when I find that I get bored or I just don't know what to do, I kind of find something that I never thought I would do and just go do it. So, like, if you've never been line dancing,
been trying that.
Yeah. And of course, it's hard with the shutdown.
Anything.
Yeah, it's kind of hard with the shutdown.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I mean, if you like animals, go to a shelter and pet some cats for a while. That's always really cool. Just try something different. Volunteer somewhere. Hand out soup. If you don't like that, try handing out clothes. I don't know. Try to find random videos on YouTube. What's that, Matt?
I kind of want to attack this from a completely different angle.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I don't necessarily know what people mean when they say, oh, I'm passionate about this, but I'm not passionate about that. Or I'm not passionate about anything. I have a number of things that I'm probably passionate about, but I also understand that not just religion, we as a society have given people a false bill of goods and a false expectation on a number of things. We've taught people that they should have one partner who fills all their needs, which is obviously bullshit for the overwhelming majority of people. Even if you just do serial monogamy, like I was married for a while and now we've moved on to other things and we're both better off for it. The notion that two people, and by the way, I'm not talking about my marriage. We went into it knowing one person shouldn't be expected this. We do the same thing with regard to education, that you need to go to college and get a 4-year degree, when the truth is not as many people need to do that for what they want it to do as are suggested for it. We try to, I remember as a kid, there were kids around me who seemed to have to know exactly what they wanted to do with their life, and they knew exactly what the path was, and I didn't know at all. I had no direction, no ambition. There were things that I liked and I had interest in, and I would study them. And basically, I just had it. I was like an obsessive learner, but not like one thing I was focused on. I think it may be a false narrative that there needs to be something, some individual thing that you're passionate about or more passionate about than anything else. I think that that's propping up a false narrative when it may just be okay to be interested in this for a while, and then interested in this for a while, and then interested. The only thing that I think we should agree I should always be caring about is me.
That makes sense.
I mean, there's people who'll just go, look at Matt. He only cares about, no. I said, the only thing that I should care about all the time is me. I should care about all kinds of things. I should care about the people in the atheist community of Austin. I should care about the people who are sponsoring these shows. And I should care about the people that are calling in. I should care about the people that, my family and friends that I love and everything. I should care about Black Lives Matter. I should care about police violence. I should care about all of these things because they're all valuable and they're all part of the human experience that I'm a part of. I'm just saying the only thing that, you can care about, you can focus on one thing one day, but not everybody has to I'm going to do cancer research and specifically breast cancer research and only breast cancer research for the rest of my life. Raw. Not every mind works that way. Some people are better off with a more shotgun style approach.
That makes sense. I guess I've always considered, since I was so incredibly passionate about religion and studying the scriptures and analyzing it and going into all of that, I could put 100% in at any point, always.
But
and I just haven't found anything else like that. So maybe it's just, I don't even need that, I guess.
You can keep your passion for religion. Like I had a passion for religious understanding and stuff. I'm putting it to use.
Very true. Very true. I do run a support group for people who are leaving and questioning Mormonism in the area.
Nice.
And some things like that. I haven't found anything in my life that I'm so excited about to wake up and do anymore. And it's been really hard.
Well, all of Phil's suggestions are good. My kind of diversionary thing may be relevant, but also look for communities that you could interact with, recovering from religion, other things that are in that realm, so that you don't necessarily have to have it all figured out today.
That makes sense. Well, I really appreciate your guys' thoughts and chatting with me. Like I said, it's an honor to speak to both of you.
Thank you so much.
Long-time listener. I've kind of replaced religion with the Atheist Experience the last few months.
Fair enough.
Well, we appreciate it, and you take care of yourself in this time, and we're grateful for the call. We are over the 6 o'clock hour, and
I noticed that.
I have not heard whether or not I should continue. There's a couple of callers left that I'd like to get to, as long as the crew is all willing to keep up on that, and that's me stalling long enough for them to say, "Oh, there it is. There's the message. Yes, keep going." And I'm assuming Phil's good.
Yeah. I get time and a half now.
I got to give him more time to make sure that he donates his birthday money to us.
Yeah.
All right. So we have RJ in Colorado who will prove the existence of God with probability and statistics.
No, he won't.
There's no way we could have
That's not how that works.
Billion people if evolution was true. Are you kidding? Hey, RJ. Welcome, I think.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to 100% prove it.
I believe
do think it gives credence.
Congratulations. We are all in agreement.
Gives relevance.
Yay. We'll stop while we're ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead, RJ.
Well, I guess what I was saying is basically, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. And if you go by evolution's timeline, which is suppose 400,000 years, is just
I don't know. No, you've lost me. You've lost me. Where's this 400,000 year thing come from?
The 200. Well, that's what most evolutionists believe, right? 200,000 years is when the first man walked the earth.
I don't think it's. Well, I think maybe modern man, but okay. So let's say modern man. Are you saying that you couldn't have gotten from 40 or 50 people to to billions in that time frame. Is that what you're suggesting?
What I'm saying is that we would have way more people on the planet if
so
humans have been around for over 200,000 people.
You're assuming static growth. The thing is that population changes are affected by more than just how many people there are to fuck.
Because not every one of them does so.
Yeah. And so it is a resource game, and it is also wars and
polio, diseases,
pandemics, and other things. But the study of the population growth of humans, there are actually people who spent, the bulk of their lives studying this and analyzing this. If you're correct, why are you calling the Atheist Experience?
Because it gives more relevance to the biblical story that it was the Earth is supposed to 6,000 years old.
If you're correct, sir, you have a model.
You just made it worse.
Fundamentally shows that everything about population science is wrong, and you should be getting a Nobel Prize and a Templeton Foundation Prize. Why are you calling an internet call-in show where with two people, neither one of them are population experts, to present this case? Why aren't you out, like changing the world with this?
I want to say that. I'm just saying that gives relevance to the biblical story.
Yeah, I don't think it does.
I'm not saying that I'm a population expert.
There weren't 25 people
I would say it's
alive at the time of Jesus. So you're not changing the number that was around 2,000 years ago. You're just adding in Jesus. So if the number of people we had 2,000 years ago.
I meant 2,000 years ago. I said 6,000 years ago.
Jesus was around 6,000 years ago?
I'm not. Yeah, 6,000 years is typically. I mean, I don't know if that's exact, but
no.
That's typically
we're talking about
what the Bible
I'm talking about
says, correct?
Jesus. Was Jesus around 6,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago? I had it right the first time. Was Jesus on Earth 6,000 years ago?
I would say, yeah, there's lots of witnesses. I mean,
there's witnesses that Jesus was on Earth 6,000 years ago.
No, not 6,000, 2,000 years ago.
Okay,
I said
let me go back.
Population started 6,000 years ago.
So first of all, we're getting off track talking about the historicity of Jesus, and there are no eyewitness accounts. We have 0 eyewitness accounts. However, I'm talking about
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were eyewitnesses.
Luke and John.
No. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
4 books were not written by the people whose names on them, and they were not written by eyewitnesses.
Nor were they written at the time.
Are anonymous and copied from each other. If you think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John were actually written, you should go watch the debate I did on this, because even most Christian scholars reject that notion. But you called in to talk about a problem with population growth. Now, are you suggesting that experts in population science have overlooked this glaring problem that you've discovered?
I would say, yeah. I mean, it just takes common sense to realize that you wouldn't have 7.5 billion people if the world was over 200,000 years old. If you look at writings,
did you figure this out on your own?
No, I mean, I researched it, but another thing that really just gives it relevant. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did somebody else figure this out, and then you're just telling me what somebody else figured out?
I wouldn't. Someone else figured it out.
Did you sit down and do the math?
I thought about it, and I've heard from other people about it. I mean, it's like math. I don't, people figure out math.
Did you do the math?
They don't necessarily need other people to help them figure out math.
Did you do the math?
Yeah, I did do the math.
What is your expertise?
I mean, I did.
What is your expertise in training in population models?
Just looking at the past 100, 200 years. Just looking at demographics.
That's not how population science goes.
And we started the show with something like that.
What you're doing is the rough equivalent of the people who have no understanding of biology or geology, who call in to suggest that the Earth is flat, or that vaccines cause autism,
or the magnetic field is going away.
You are the Google expert. You found something, it didn't make sense to you, and rather than studying it to gain an actual understanding, you just sat down and started doing the math.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's other people online that believe the same thing. A lot of other demographics.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all.
Who follow demographics.
Yeah, and some of them.
I mean, just do the math.
Some of them think, no. You don't have to just do the math. You have to do the math right. You have to have the right variables,
okay, well,
the right understanding to build a viable model in order to do the math. And you haven't made any demonstration that you have any expertise or ability to do that. And yet all of the population models that we have, you're saying are wrong. Congratulations.
Wait, all the population models, what population models are you referring to?
I would recommend that you go Google and do some study on how we actually learn about population models, because you are essentially a Google expert, which is making you look Google foolish because you're trying to say that something is impossible because the math that you did, which doesn't line up with population models, shows that everybody else is wrong. So congratulations, go get your Nobel Prize or whatever else, but we're done with that.
And there you go.
We got Jesse in California on with Phil and Matt. It says here, you think the human body appears designed because the brain has a high level of consciousness. What exactly does high level of consciousness mean?
Hi, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Okay, thanks. No, I called because I wanted to talk about giants and titans that are found all across the world.
No, so
the remains of giants and titans that are.
Jesse, I've muted you because the call screener has a note here that says you claim the human body appears designed and it has a high level of consciousness. Is that what you told the call screener?
Yeah, but I want to talk about giants and titans.
No, Jesse,
everybody calls about the human.
Jesse, if you call in and tell the call screener what you want to talk about, why would you want to talk about something else? Because that to me seems incredibly dishonest.
Because giants and titans are never talked about in your show.
Yeah, that's because giants and titans aren't real. But if you would have told the call screener that you wanted to talk about giants and titans, I would have had a conversation with you about it. So I'm going to suggest that you call back.
Proof.
I'm going to suggest that you call back some other week because we're already over time and just be fucking honest for a change, because I'm not taking dishonest callers. You can prove it when you call back and are honest about it. Goodbye.
Yeah, it's always a bad way to start a conversation or a relationship is to lie. Let's lie so I can get through the door, and then I'm going to be indignant that you don't want to hear what I had to say, even though it was not what I told you. That's bad form, dude.
Yeah. So we are now on the official final caller of this wonderful episode of the Atheist Experience with Phil and Matt. We have Steve in Ohio. How are you, Steve?
Hey, how are you? Let me walk over here to get the AC that just went on. Hi, guys. I know I'm the last caller, and you guys want to probably get home.
I am home.
We are home.
You probably are home. Yeah, I was going to say you are home. Yeah. Okay, let me see. Hey, I'm with you on that. You want facts, and I like facts, too. I started off as I didn't know if God existed or not. But I do have an opinion now, and I'd like to share it with you guys. It's time to do that. And do you mind if I...
Do you have facts now? That's you mentioned the facts.
If you have facts and evidence to back up the opinion, then of course
you guys.
then of course, if you have facts and evidence to back up the opinion, then we're interested. If it's just an opinion, we're not.
Okay. Well, no. Let me go on with it then. 25 years ago, 26. Made a prayer. I'm leaving a lot out, but I have to do that because of the time. Anyways, I made a prayer and it was answered. And I asked him, I said, God, I gave him something that I really liked. It was just something I had to give up. But while I was at it, I said, God, could you just let me know if you're real, and let me know what's going to happen before it happens? I said I would tell everybody, and he answered, and here's what came. Okay, he led me to Daniel 8. Okay, and that is about a ram and a goat at the end of time. Do you know anything about that one?
I know a little about it.
The Old Testament.
It is a passage and scripture that is widely interpreted in a number of different ways because it's nonsensical stuff, and so you can make it same to say whatever you feel like you want.
That's fine. Okay, I understand that. And if they said it was Alexander the Great 25 years ago and so on and so forth. Okay, let me open up one thing I just want to say, one verse, because this is the one I'm worried about, okay? It talks about a ram and a goat. One of it is called Persia. The other one, which is the ram, the other one, the goat, is called the Kingdom of Greece on the west of the face of the whole earth.
Steve.
Now, I know Greece is kind of, so, symbolically, we are Greece.
Steve.
Okay, that's the way I looked at it. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
First of all.
We got a war coming up. First of all,
I'd like to ask questions because
I'm sorry.
You made a prayer and you gave something to God and God answered your prayer. And I want to make sure I'm clear that the answer to your prayer was God pointed you to Daniel 8.
Yes, because I said I would tell people.
How did God point you to that? How did God point you to that? And how does that count as an answered prayer?
Okay, well, I'm trying. He led me afterwards to this.
No.
I don't know. This is 26 years ago. I don't know how many hours or days or weeks. I mean, I don't remember.
Steve, if God led you to something and you don't remember it, I don't believe that.
No, what day? I don't know what day afterwards. 26 years ago.
Steve, listen.
I remember everything.
Steve, listen.
Don't let me talk, though.
I know if you'd shut up and listen, you'd realize I did not ask you what day it was. I asked you said you prayed to God, you gave God something. I don't know how you give God something. You might want to try and explain that at some point, but that the prayer was answered, and the answer was that God led you to Daniel 8. What I said was, how did God lead you to Daniel 8?
That's what I was explaining. Can I finish this? I know you guys have to go, but can I say something here?
I think you have said something. Why is it well, you will not answer the question that I'm asked? The single most important question that allows this conversation to progress forward, I asked you, and you will not answer it. What do you mean when you said God led you to Daniel 8? Did you hear a voice? Did the book fall open on the floor? How do you know that God led you to Daniel 8? That's the question.
Okay, because I've read the Bible before, I didn't understand it. Okay,
Goodbye,
fair enough. I think a lot of people are there.
Goodbye, sir.
Okay.
Goodbye, sir. Goodbye, sir.
That's
I appreciate your time, but when I ask repeatedly how God led you to something, and the first words out of your mouth were, I've read the Bible before, you are not engaging and holding up your end of the conversation. Daniel 8 is one of many books that people want to claim are prophetic. And it's all a matter of interpretation, which we already saw Steve going down that path of, this animal represents this country and this animal represents this country. And you may be right, but it's subject to interpretation. And none of it is prophecy just because you've interpreted something to be consistent with the facts of the world. Just like it doesn't count as answered prayer just because you asked God for something and then you eventually went and looked at Daniel 8 and understood it differently. You can't show that God gave you that understanding.
You know, it's funny because over the last 2,000 years, you could look at that verse, and apparently he was going to some war thing. Anyone that had looked at that verse in the last 2,000 years and said somewhere in the near future there's going to be a war probably was right.
Yeah.
But anyone who did not look at that verse and say there's probably going to be a war in the near future would also have been right.
Yeah.
So that didn't help at all.
And rumors of wars. It's why I'm never impressed with prophecy, because here's the truth about prophecy. A, it needs to be specific and answerable by a specific circumstance. It should not be subject to interpretation at all. B, obviously, it needs to be in place before the events that it's predicting and not after. And C, not only should we not be able to interpret it at all, but it can't be something mundane like there's going to be a war or the waiter's going to bring me a medium rare steak that I asked for. It can't be something that people are actively working towards. Like, I predict that someday Jerusalem will be its own, nation. And if people are actively working for that, they're working for it because of the prediction, not because the prediction's already true. There's a number of problems with this, which I see, as a magician who does like predictions and mind reading and stuff like that on stage on occasion, that people just don't seem to be able to recognize. And it's the pattern recognition parts of our brain where when we look at the Bible, if you're convinced that you're going to open a book and find an incredibly a message that is significant to your life right where you open it, and this is something we do. I've got a Bible right here. I've got my Bible that I've had and took to Windermere. I'm going to open, boom, randomly. It's John 8. There was no bookmark here or anything else. And I just happened to glance at 26, which John 8:26 says, I have many things to say and to judge of you, but he that sent me is true. And I speak to the world those things which I have heard of him. Now, it's pretty easy for a reasonably intelligent person to take that and say, you know what? What do I spend my time doing? I say things. I say things in order to try to have conversation with people and educate them, edify. That's what that verse is pointing at. It's, I have things to say. That means that God wants me to be an atheist, and God wants me to say these. You can do this with almost any passage from almost any book. You can mold it so that it makes sense for your life or so that it makes sense to whatever circumstance you want. It's not always going to work, and it's not always going to be rock solid, but it's going to work often enough that if you want to make a claim of prophecy, you better come with a prediction that was clearly in place ahead of time, that was specific, answerable by a single set of circumstances, that was not something mundane to be predicted.
There's got to be a war.
There's got to be a war. Yeah. I don't even... Tell me something I don't know.
Yeah, that was a strong argument to end on. Not.
You're bald. Congratulations. Yeah.
You are going to be bald tomorrow, by the way.
Yes.
There's my prediction.
Depending on your definition of bald, because if you mean truly hairless, then I'm not. I would have shaved most of it. But yeah. Anyway, that's it for this episode of the Atheist Experience. We've run over. I know there's people who want to eat. I want to thank my friend Phil Ferguson, who not only helped us out by being here today and offering good advice and information for our callers, but is going to give us the birthday money. And by the way, thank you to everybody.
That was a prophecy, by the way.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody who donated, because at this point, $3,566 donated during this episode of the Atheist Experience. We are very grateful for that. It's going to allow us to continue doing the shows. It's going to allow the organization to continue to grow. And we also support or help support a number of other organizations because the broader secular community needs all of us working together, which is one of the reasons why I'm so proud to have Phil, who I gestured the wrong direction to, as both a friend and hopefully frequent co-host in person and away. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Y'all take care of yourselves. Be safe. And we'll see you next week.
Ciao.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?